Good morning and welcome to World Talks on TVP World. I'm Diana Escada. Thanks for being with us. Now let's go back to our leading story this morning. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump took the stage in Philadelphia Tuesday night for their first debate of the 2024 U.S. election. Now, 90 minutes of discussions ranging from the American economy to abortion rights, the war in Gaza, and the conflict in Ukraine. Now, joining me now to discuss what was said about our region is Eoin McNamara, Research Fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Eoin, thank you so much for being with us here this morning.
Thank you.
Let's first get into this heated debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump regarding NATO. Now, both candidates mentioned their differing views, approaches to NATO, of course, in relation to the war in Ukraine. I mean, Kamala Harris did say that the NATO alliance was the most important alliance that was ever created in the world. Now, how do you assess their positions on the exact role that the NATO alliance should play in supporting Ukraine and defending Eastern European borders, especially Poland?
Well, I think Donald Trump, he has a bit of a history with NATO, of course, because he was president before, and that is quite a checkered history. I think Kamala Harris, she has a more traditional U.S., going back into the past, Republican or Democrat view of NATO, that it is a crucial alliance for the United States, that the United States needs allies in the world, needs reliable and strong alliances, that America cannot go it alone. Whereas Donald Trump is a lot more eclectic. We saw this in the region the last time he was president. At the very beginning of his term, his four-year term that began in 2017, he actually ramped up a lot of provisions for the eastern flank, for Poland and the Baltic states. And he actually had a very strong foreign and security policy team to begin with General Mattis, or retired General Mattis, as Secretary of Defense, and his national security advisor, Eoin McNamara. But this turned around very, very quickly by the end of his time as president. At the end, of course, there were rumors that he was willing to withdraw the United States from NATO, and we had the French President Macron describe NATO as brain dead as a consequence. So Trump really is very, very much a wild card in that regard. We can expect a lot more consistency in NATO's support for the eastern flank of the alliance, and indeed military support, military aid for Ukraine under a Kamala Harris president. But as we've seen as well, that will also depend on the composure of the US Congress. That's the military aid dimension for Ukraine.
Right. And what about, if I could just ask you specifically, how do you think that this could impact the situation on Poland's border?
Well, of course, if we see a United States that is less committed to NATO, that, of course, encourages Putin. That is a signal of weakness. And Putin might want to test the limit with hybrid aggression and with probing, etc. So we've seen this. We see this very regularly. We've seen this in Latvia in recent days, where a Russian drone is reported to have crash landed. So testing, probing, hybrid interference, a ratcheting up of tensions might accompany any action that sees less U.S. commitment to NATO.
Now, Eoin, how significant, let's talk about if we take Finland. I mean, Finland's president met with Poland's president in Warsaw here yesterday. Many, of course, they talked about their joint cooperation in regards to European security, in regards to the war in Ukraine, their bilateral relations, the importance that these two countries share now, particularly since Finland has just recently joined NATO. And now, so how significant would you say is Finland's recent NATO membership in reshaping Europe's defense posture, particularly in terms of joint initiatives with Poland against what you just said, hybrid, right, and conventional threats?
Yes, I mean, in this regard, Finland brings a lot of knowledge to the alliance. It's always been a connoisseur or a primary purveyor of total defense, and the Finns now like to call this comprehensive security, where they can bring this whole of society approach, you know, a strong military reserve, strong armed forces for a small country, strong independent defense capacity, and a society that will never give up on Finnish sovereignty and independence, and can often then be watertight against hybrid interference. So Helsinki's got a lot to bring in this regard, and so does Poland. Poland is a slightly larger state, can lead more within the alliance. It's one of the 4 or 5 large powers within NATO, and it is a big voice for the eastern flank, for Nordic Baltic security, and for wider Eastern European security as well. So both sides really complement each other, I think, in this regard at this time. And meetings like yesterday's meeting between the presidents are very, very welcome to bring things forward.
That's right. Now let's talk about just, like you said, about another joint cooperation that they have, of course, is Finland's border and Poland's border and the migration issue, right? So we have, last year the FSB, right, attempted to push thousands of illegal migrants into the European Union through the Russia-Finland border. Poland here has the same problem with the Belarus border. Now, how do you think that this exchange of experiences between Poland and Finland on these migration challenges could actually influence European security policies and also the cybersecurity aspect as well?
Well, I think going back to indeed Finland in 2016, it's a long time ago now, almost 8 years, that we saw in the winter of that year suddenly migrants from third countries turning up in the Finnish Arctic, a very unusual place for third country migrants to show up in the cold and in the dead of night, and where there was very, very little infrastructure to process them. So there was a real crisis on the hands of Finnish policymakers back then. But Russia can only play, or Belarus indeed, can only play this card so many times. It was a surprise back then. Finland and other countries had to respond to it, indeed Poland and Lithuania in more recent years. But we are getting used to it. We see the problem very clearly. The element of surprise is gone from Russia and Belarus. We can prepare for this hybrid threat, and it's all about shutting down gaps and showing zero tolerance at our borders for this kind of behavior. This year, when it occurred to Finland, when Russia tried to instrumentalize migrants in this regard, they found that Finland responded very, very quickly by shutting many of its eastern border posts. It wasn't going to tolerate it. So a quick response, anticipating the threat, is important. And I think Finland, Poland and the Baltic states have a lot of knowledge. Their border authorities have a lot of knowledge to share with the wider EU and NATO authorities in this regard, because this kind of hybrid threat can happen anywhere across NATO or across the European Union. Maybe not anywhere, maybe that's saying too much, but it can happen in many different locations across the Union. So border authorities across the Union need to be vigilant. Poland, the Baltic states, Finland have a lot of expertise to lend.
You mentioned about that surprise, right? That surprise a short while ago. But can you just elaborate just a little bit more on the surprise attack? Like, what specifically, maybe at least one specific that these countries could do in order to try to avoid these kind of surprises? I mean, it's difficult, particularly, let's not forget, winter is coming up, right? That plays quite a factor there.
Yeah, I think that the surprise goes away with time. The more prepared you are to deal with the threat, the more zero tolerance, essentially, you have towards this threat, the more watertight your borders are, the more adaptable or adjustable your border regimes are towards this threat. Eventually, the aggressors, in this case, we strongly suspect Russia and Belarus, they will get fed up, they will get frustrated, they will realize this tactic isn't working, and they will cease and desist from this tactic. But it definitely depends on the EU and NATO side of the border. It depends on our agility, and it depends on our competences.
Eoin, considering that both countries, so both Poland's and Finland's proximity to Russia. You also just mentioned the Baltic region. Now, how might the strengthening of these countries' bilateral security ties influence the broader security dynamics of the entire Baltic Sea region?
Well, this is definitely occurring, and we're seeing. We're seeing different initiatives. We're seeing the Baltic states, really, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, create themselves kind of into a border union, the three of them working on, because they share the same strategic space within the EU and NATO, the three of them working on border defences together. There's been a number of memorandums of understanding and high-level ministerial meetings in this regard. So all of this strengthens security in the region, strengthens independence of security in the region. If the region states do more, there will be less pressure on wider EU and NATO resources. There will be less vulnerabilities for EU and NATO resources, and there would be less. If we talk about Donald Trump, if he comes back to the presidency in the United States, we can always signal that to the Americans as well, that states in the region, through their own independent capacity and through their own cooperation, are really pulling their own weight here, really taking their security serious, and that is a good message to send out, no matter who takes up the presidency in the White House in a few months' time.
That's right. Thank you so much for your input. And of course, Eoin, I think it also is going to definitely depend how that's going to turn out, depending on who wins these presidential elections. Thank you so much. That was Eoin McNamara, Research Fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you for being with us here on TVP World.
Thank you.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks. Stay with us for more for our next news edition coming up soon. Thanks for watching.